lineups, you know, control warrior, control priest pairings just coming out. But it turns out in the end, I think, you know, that combination only accounts for about 5% of the metagame in tournament overall. So we don't have that much of a control lineup overall. And of course, the big reason for that is, as everyone knows if you've played Hearthstone, like playing control at the moment in this metagame is incredibly difficult because there's so many decks with these incredible, unstoppable win conditions that, you know, going to the late game with control just can't really compete against. But we are going to kick things off now, and we are going to be leading out with the Weapon Rogue going up against the Brute Demon Hunter. And of course, you know, we've been having our fun with the memes and plenty of Brute Me Dude as the tournament has gone on, but this is just one of those matchups, right? Like, Hearthstone just has to brute you against Weapon Rogue.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. And that's kind of why I was wondering already, as I imagine not all too much will happen in these early turns. I'll get into the mulligan decisions. He threw away a glide in the second position, right, just after the quest, with a sigil already in hand. So he had the good hand. If you have sigil, you're already pretty happy with your starting hand. Do you think there was any consideration as to holding on to the glide to try and go for that big pop-off turn and get the early brutes?
Well, the thing is with glide specifically is you need to get very lucky with a glide to actually have a brute pop off, right? Because if you draw one card at the start of your turn, you play glide on 4, you draw 4 more cards. That's only discounting your brutes by 5, so you're still dealing with 2 mana brutes at that point. So you kind of need soul fragments in the deck to draw soul fragments, or to hit like Sigil Runner in outcast position or double jump, so they then get discounted to 0, so you can then go on it even further. So I think early glide doesn't actually brute you that consistently. So I don't mind TIZS just going for a very fast hand, because I think some of the most disgusting hands are, you know, just quick and easy first quest completion into those same cards getting discounted, right? You discount like a Sigil Runner or a Sigil for the next turn or a Philosophy or whatever else, and then you just suddenly have all this stuff you can do for 0 mana to pop off with.
Fair enough. Well, either way, for TIZS, well, drawing that soul fragment maybe isn't what he was looking for, but having the Rustrot Viper, that is absolutely what you are looking for. And actually, even getting the soul fragment works out quite well, because he can still go Coin Viper afterwards, should he want to. But I guess there's actually the consideration for letting them have the weapon for a turn. You don't have to destroy all 4 charges for it to be the best Viper possible, I suppose.
I'm a big fan of the false sense of security. It's like at Masters Tours, it's the feeling that Raven gets on his birthday when he gets to cast with a few other people, and then he gets that false sense of security, and then I come back in to just crush his spirits. I love this bait with the Viper where you just kind of wait a turn and let them load up some poisons. TIZS does seem like he's going to go for it, but we did actually see that in a previous series as well, I think, where I think it was the Dead Draw series, where a player held off for an extra turn, let the poisons get jammed on, particularly because that's a self-sharpening and not a Swine Tusk Shank, right? Which I think if you can afford to just make sure Meati is all in on that weapon, because for all you know, he's just about to play Swine Tusk Shank this turn, right? And then just jam up all of his poisons on that.
That's true
as well.
It's hard to know, but at the same time, like, against Weapon Rogue, just having a 3/4 on board as well is pretty valuable. They don't have all too much removal, and you can start hitting them, getting the damage in relatively quickly.
That is a good point. Meati is going to have to come up with an alternate game plan here. The good news, I will say, if we're digging really hard for silver linings for the Meat Man, is that you don't actually need to do that much damage against this deck. It's not like a Fell Demon Hunter that's going to reset back to 30 several times over the course of the game. If you can just get a couple of weapon swings to go face, you can just finish the job with Bleeds, Wicked Stab, Sinister Strike, etc. Because there's no real healing in the deck outside of Soul Fragments. But worth noting, there's a lot more Soul Fragments in TIZS version of the deck than you're usually dealing with because of the addition of those Soul Shields.
Yeah, that's very true. And for Meati, I think he would quite happily have just stuck the Silverleaf Poison only, on the self-sharpening sword and just drawn his whole deck. But now for TIZS, his prayers have been answered. Oh my lord.
Okay.
You can just play 1 this turn, right? That's still insane.
Yeah. Love to see it, especially since it's going to get the buff. The cheaper one, obviously being the one that you're going to play, is also the one that gets copied, therefore the one that gets buffed by the Philosophy, so it comes down massive this turn.
Oh, look at that. Okay, Swine Tusk Shank. is a welcome draw, but you can't even kill it, right? Are you swinging into that if you don't manage to kill it in one turn? You could go Shank Paralytic Poison to deal 3 damage to it and then pray that you get another one next turn so that you don't just destroy your weapon. Like, it's awful.
It's absolutely gross, yeah. He's just going to swing with his Silver Leaf. I was just going to say, there's no Coerce in Meati's deck. He's playing these 2 copies of Yoink in the spot where 1 Coerce and a couple of other tech cards that you can play. Sometimes a second Self-Sharpening do go, but he is playing the double Yoink, which means, I think, again, I don't know how many people got time to adapt, because I think no one really knew whether Brute was going to be a force in this metagame until, 10 minutes before submission, right?
Yeah.
Everyone was still very undecided, but I think if you do know that Brute is going to be a factor, maybe Coerce is a card that you could have gone for in the deck.
Yeah, I mean, Coerce is obviously better than Yoink, but Yoink is not a bad card versus Brute Demon Hunter. Like, you can get a steady shot, you can get life tap, even just ping to go past the taunts is worth an awful lot. But obviously, in a situation like this, when they just go Brute every turn, it doesn't even need to draw, he's just playing Boulder Fist Ogres each turn, and that's still going to be enough to get there.
That's the thing. Like, I keep talking about it, but there are actually genuinely decks in the game right now that would lose to, like, coin Boulder Fist Ogre.
Drastically.
Yeah, yep. That's just where we are with Hearthstone at the moment. Where
it's like in the...
apart from in his kitchen, is in a world of misery.
Why not both?
Yeah. That's what he calls his kitchen, the world of misery.
Yeah, he's not allowed to be a good cook. That's where I have to draw the line for me to feel good about myself as a person.
Based on players' relative Twitter game, I think will be hard-pressed to compete with Alatemu in terms of cookery skills.
I mean, you say that, but I've been watching his stream. He just eats absolute rubbish most days. He's ice cream and nothing else most streams. Like, he full-on baited you, I swear.
Okay, all right.
He got ice cream, McDonald's, yeah.
Is there a line for Meati? Even with second Cloak of Shadows, even with 6 extra damage going in the deck that he could top deck for free on runner with 3 bleeds, like, there is just no world, surely.
Yep, Meati just going through his self-ascribed how to allot your time in a Hearthstone turn.
That's right.
What am I going to do? How am I going to optimize my turn? How quickly shall I concede? As the third point there. Because, again, as
count your opponent's brutes. Step 2, count your opponent's health. Step 3, concede.
This will get you to 5 digits in Legend, I guarantee.
TIZS now has to play that wonderful game in Hearthstone, which is, I don't want to think about this anymore. I've absolutely won the game, but I should probably still work out what the best play is this turn. And it's probably Soul Fragments in draw cards, right?
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I see.
That's kind of bad, right? That has to target a minion. You don't really want to get rid of Silence, I guess, but...
Yeah.
Honestly, I might have still just played that, just to get more stats on the board, just make it a little bit harder to ever clear this off. But yeah, this will do. Closer and closer to Kurtrus, and the 5-mana 7/7 alone, usually a hindrance, will just be, if it was even needed, the final nail in the coffin.
Very clean first game for TIZS, and another good showing on stream, does need to be said, for the Brute Demon Hunter. We've got a very strong hand, double Brute philosophy. And really, just not even doing the thing that the deck has been known to do, with playing 1 million of them on consecutive, well, in one turn. Just playing 1 on consecutive turns just ended up being more than enough against this draw from Meati.
Yeah, and with no Silverleaf Poison on his shank, I think his face says it all. That's GG. Oh, sorry, 1-off lethal. Finish it up, TIZS.
Hide behind your
Kane Tusk Piercer. Fury, I believe, not in the deck because it made way for the Soul Shears overall, right? It was one of the cards that made the way. So there was a little bit more chance than you might normally expect against the list. Say Blythe has been playing on stream, that he was going to live that turn and not get hit with the 1 extra damage needed. But yeah, it was just a fantastic performance for Brute and a miserable performance for Weapon Rogue, which I think two of the decks that will have those performances on stream, right? Where they go, they go either 0 or they go to full 100, depending on what matchups they get, depending on how the draws pan out, just depending on the shape of the series as a whole, because they are two real feast or famine decks in this metagame.
Yeah, and Weapon Rogue specifically, right? Because we saw what did him in there. It was just the weapon tech. Like, if enough of the field is teching in those Rustrot Vipers, your win rate is going to drop by like 5% or something at least. Like it just absolutely bottoms out your chances of taking the win, especially as the Weapon Rogue is brought to beat lineups like this one that TIZS has, where he has this combo strategy. Again, he's got the Demon Hunter, the Warlock in there, banning the Druid away. Okay, sure, that makes sense. But if it's not getting these wins, it's not feeling strong at all. As TIZS says, you know what, that looks painful. Let's give this a go myself.
I'm feeling like a bit of torture, actually. Let's just queue up this Weapon Rogue. Yeah, he is playing a pretty similar list overall, but you can see there are no yoinks in the deck, right? What's he got in there to make room for the in replacement of the yoinks? Because I'm not seeing any coerce. There's still only one self-sharpening sword.
Yeah, I'm running through, right? They're both playing Guild Trader. Both got the cutting class as well. Yeah, I will get back to you. I'm going blind as to.
Oh, it's a secret passage. Meati is. Oh no, Meati. Sorry. Okay. No. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say that for Meati, that would be extreme. That would be extreme indeed.
Yeah. It's a 1-mana card, but I'm just literally going blind. Oh, it's the Prize Plunderers, right? Yeah. Okay. Meati is not playing.
Oh wow! I didn't even
Prize
consider
Plunderers
that.
in his list. Yeah,
I considered that perhaps even more ridiculous than my suggestion. How are you interacting with any minion at that point? I suppose you're not, is the answer that we're giving. Yeah, but a Weapon Rogue now going to come out from TIZS side. Very similar list overall. You'd say he has a little bit more of a chance to answer the board, but even then, this build of the deck has gone even further away from fighting for board than the build in the previous meta did, right? Which was at least playing Mancrick, for example. So sometimes you just coined out a 3/4 and you just drew through your deck for that early wife, and you really pushed damage that way. You had those Prize Plunderers in there, which could get a little bit of tempo in the early game as well. Now it is very, very all in on just weapons go face.
Yeah, I mean, even the minions that you are playing, it's very reluctantly just because you have Swindle in there and you need that broken card draw to keep turboing through your deck. If you didn't have that, like what, you're playing a Guild Trader, you can just cut that. You don't really need that in the list, to be honest. I mean, even for Meati, is that like the only minion he has in his deck? Like, it's a very, very weird build with double Swindle in there as well.
It's just, that's just the Demon Hunter build, right? Instead of the weapon, where you put in Peddler and then draw it out with the weapon and put it back in again, it's Guild Trader. You just draw it out with Swindle, you put it back in again, and you draw it out with Swindle. It makes perfect sense.
Sure, let's go with that. Let's go with that as an explanation, as we are getting a Weapon Rogue mirror here. One of the... one of the least interactive matchups in Hearthstone, but it can be very fun in its own way. Like, in small doses, I do like watching this matchup because it's a very different facet of Hearthstone that you are flexing here. In that it's obviously not a fight for board control whatsoever. It's just about maximizing your card draw and your efficiency of damage.
Now this, Derek, is freaking pod racing right here. This is what they pay to see. Both with the triple S in hand. Meati using that Yoink tech that he had on turn 1. Interesting because he took the middle ground, right? He took Druid, which is 1 armor, 1 attack. He had the option for Priest or probably Warrior in that position, just to gain the straight up 2 armor. Obviously, they all kind of reach equilibrium. The Priest is probably strictly worse than Warrior because you have no interest in hero powering minions. But he did end up going for the middle ground with that Druid hero power instead.
I mean, this is it. Dennis walked so Meati could run. He is living his absolute Hearthstone dream right now. As TIZS you'd have to imagine it's just coin self-sharpening sword. Is there any fear in the matchup that self-sharpening sword doesn't get there? Because in some of the other matchups, if you play self-sharpening sword, stick all your poisons on it. If they heal up or stick taunts in the way, you can run out of damage, whereas that's not really a possibility with the Shank. Do you think that's any concern at all, or does he just load up every poison he possibly can on this sword?
Yeah, I'm not super worried about it. I was talking about this with Raven earlier, and I haven't, validated this weapon rogue opinion with Jay Alexander, so, take it with a pinch of salt, because obviously nothing you say about rogue means anything. Jay Alex agrees with it. But it seems like this is a meta where self-sharpening sword is just almost as good as Swine Tusk Shank anyway, because most of the matchups you're trying to win or have any realistic chance of winning, the sword does enough damage alongside maybe 1 or 2 wicked stabs and a bleed here or there or whatever else to get the job done. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if both players are just 100% all in on these triple S's.
Oh, was there any concern? Was there any consideration for getting the SI7 extortion face while he was at full health? Like, you miss one card draw going the paralytic poison, but that's 3 damage, man. I don't want to trade that. He has so much card draw anyway.
I remember an argument that we had through Lorinda. We never actually interacted with each other on this topic, but he was trying to learn how to play Miracle Garrote Rogue on like day 1, day 2 or something. And you told him to weapon face as early as possible to play around Ice Barrier because you'd never attack face again. And I told him not to do that because then you get to SI7 exclusive face for 3 damage. So if you weapon face, you actually miss 2 damage in the game. And the poor little boy got very confused.
I mean, honestly here, I do think it was actually correct to go about it the other way. You miss out 1 card draw, but you get Paralytic Poison plus SI7. That's like 4 extra damage that you are milking out, right? I think that little bit of extra damage efficiency could make the difference.
Yeah, I actually do completely agree with you. But now Garrote's going in, draws coming out with the Silver Leaf as well. TIZS has Secret Passage to back this up as well. And honestly, Meati has another miserable looking draw.
Yeah, this is an absolute disaster. He wants that second passage. He wants yoink into lifetime, I guess. Oh, like even as I started saying that, I was like, God, I want to bail on this sentence so hard. And then he gets it, and I have to actually confront it now. Like, oh, are you really taking life tap here?
It's one of those things that you say where you're like, I'm actually fairly sure this is a good idea, but if I say it, I'm going to get played so hard for it. No, it's life tap. Because honestly, the reason why I'm like actually pretty sure that is tap is because the only good thing he has in hand right now to leverage is double Cloak of Shadows. Right?
Yeah.
So damage is not a huge deal as long as he doesn't die straight up to Sinister Strike and bleeds. As long as he can stay double figures, maybe even high single figures to play around those breakpoints. As long as he can get enough cards to activate the counter lethal, then he's actually in good business. So yeah, I like using 1 cloak now just to be able to tank an extra turn. This essentially is just being used as a time walk this turn, and I think this is a very good plan overall from Meati. I think he's found himself an avenue where he's not that far behind currently. In fact, with having already drawn a Wicked Stab, he might even arguably be in front.
You could go as far to argue that. I think with the draw next turn as well, there are draws for just straight up lethal available. TIZS here, though, with a weird turn. You probably want to get the cloak through, obviously, to try and prevent that lethal on the following turn. But how you use the rest of your mana is a little awkward. You could go passage to try and find other Sinister Strike, more poisons. But having those bleeds in your deck is probably bad with the Secret Passage in there. Even then, I'm not even sure.
Cutting class is absolutely insane. He draws essentially nothing. He draws 2 mana, draw 2 cards, which I guess isn't that bad, but still.
But counting up the damage that we have available, obviously 12 we're currently looking at with the Guild Trader Wicked Stab. 13 if you count the Paralytic Poison as well. It's getting real close if there's not another Cloak of Shadows next turn. But in the game of Cloak of Shadows tennis, Meati is going to run out first if TIZS can find his second one.
Yeah, he does have Swindle to go digging. He has Secret Passage to go digging.
Yeah.
He also has infinite mana this turn with double prep in hand. So this has to be a huge turn for TIZS. He can get a lot of bleed damage through still if he starts hitting the bleeds. Interesting. Would you like you not want to put the Garrote in the deck here first?
I was tempted by that. Again, he has so much mana, right? Just every one of those you draw is a big deal because, you know, you can hit them off passage, of course, but you have to pay a mana to play all of them, right? And they don't draw you an extra card.
Right. You can see here, like, even if he hard cut, well, I guess he would still prep the Garrote and then cast the Secret Passage for 1. Even after all of that, like, he still has the mana available to be able to throw the Cloak of Shadows.
Oh, there we go. Pretty simple play. Cloak. Lead as well, I guess, just so you've got the 2 damage done. You're keeping the poison anyway, right? Because you drew it on this turn, so I think you can just hold on to that to play it next turn.
That's true, yep.
And there it is, Meati, the first player to not have stealth here because he had to play his Cloak of Shadows first, which means that TIZS looks like he might just be able to get there, right? Again, he has so many bleeds in his deck after he plays this second Garrote. It looks like it's going to be enough.
Still, this second life tap just not been used off the
I know
from Meati. It's such a miserable feeling.
I mean, he just doesn't need to use it, right? Is there any benefit? He has lethal next turn. He knows that he 100% has lethal next turn because there's no more shadows, there's no taunt, there's no heal, and there's not even yoink in the list, right?
Nope.
So there's nothing. Meati wins the game next turn. He just has to survive.
Soon.
Desperately trying to think if he actually has any agency this turn, but I'm not really sure he does. Play the cards that don't benefit from spell damage to drop the paralytic poison, and I guess you just wait and see.
Yeah, he doesn't even have second yoink, right? So he can't trade Guild Trader to try and get priest or warrior hero power. But in the end, counting it up, I think this is just essentially guaranteed lethal, right?
Yeah, so it's 9 damage, it's 2 more from the Garrote, and it's 3 from the Sinister Strike, which means TIZS needs a sum total of 1 bleed this turn from various means that he has available again.
That has to be impossible, right? With 5 bleeds in the deck. Yeah, there we go.
So he had the Silverleaf draw, obviously, and then if that didn't work, he can Secret Passage. And even though you do need to hardcast the bleeds that you draw from Secret Passage, he would have had 1 mana available to be able to throw 1 bleed out and end the game. So he was able to see so many cards that turn that it was catastrophically unlikely for Meati to stay alive that turn. But I do think he found a very nice line. I think the only big question, I suppose, would be second Cloak of Shadows timing, which I think I agree with when he threw 1 out. But you can also take the risky line of, well, I won't die this turn, I'll preserve that Cloak of Shadows, try and get 1 free turn without Cloak, and then use that Cloak, say, on that turn where Meati was stuck trying to find a win condition. Problem is, even if you don't die on the Cloak turn, if you can be put down to low single digits, then you can still die through Cloak of Shadows with Sinister Strike and Bleeds on the follow-up turn. So it's not even really guaranteed to find you that extra turn. So I think, in the long run, the way Meati did it was probably fine.
Exactly. It's the thing that we learned when playing OTK Paladin is that Timeout and Cloak of Shadows are not Ice Block. You play them when it blocks the most amount of damage rather than on the turn where it stops you necessarily dying because, exactly as you said, if he takes 10, 15 damage, even if he's not dead, the game is essentially over, and Meati knew it. Losing with his Rogue twice in a row, the Mirror and versus the Demon Hunter, is a really tough way to start things off. Just the Warlock left over for TIZS to take a win with. Just the best deck in the metagame, as I think lots of players would ascribe. At least if you asked them a few days ago, right? Like, now, you newfangled kids with your Glide Demon Hunters, Fell Demon Hunters, whatever. Back in my day, this got the job done.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there was a time where, in the right hands, this was the best deck in the game, but I do think the meta adapted around it and a few extra counters appear. Like, there was a time where people weren't even playing Celestial Druid, right? Like, that was the time originally when D6 Warlock was just running over everything. But then Celestial Druid came out to play, Weapon Rogue came out to play, all the Glide variations of Demon Hunter came out to play. Even before that, the OTK Demon Hunter tended to go one turn faster than the Warlock, and then even after the nerf, you know, they tried to adapt with various Il'gynoth builds. But again, we talked at the beginning of this how Meati is a notorious beta on Twitter, and I actually tweeted a few days ago on this exact subject saying, like, is D6 kind of solving itself? Is the meta evolving around it? Is D6 Warlock still particularly powerful? Meati replied to me and said D6 is still only unfavored versus Glide and Celestial alignment. Jay Alexander, we're bringing out all the Twitter hits here, then replied to that saying, my Poison Rogue says otherwise. And Meati then replied to Jay Alex and says, I play a lot of Poison Rogue myself and personally feel like D6 is favored. So good luck, Meati. Off you go, my friend.
Wow. Now that's what I call bad judgment on social media.
Yes.
An absolute banger after banger from all the heavy hitters. But I do see where Meati is coming from. Like, again, it's so easy to get baited by the likes of, as I always bring up, Xerios, Gabby, X-Blaize, the real gods of ladder at the moment, streaming ungodly amounts of hours for Xerios and X-Blaize especially. Where they play this D6 Warlock, they win every game on turn 6, and you wonder how it's possibly allowed, even with the nerfs to Dark Glare, of course, hitting it, you know, not especially hard, but somewhat dampening the power level of the deck. It just seems absolutely broken. Then, of course, again, as you said, you see all the counters available. I know you're going to turn your nose up at this, but I would even argue that as Shadow Priest players have got better and they've learned how to play around some of the removal from Warlock. I know. I still think it's not the hardest deck. There's not that much agency in it. But I have noticed when I get higher up in Legend, priests get harder to beat. Like when you're playing Warlock or Shaman before that, it's very, very easy. But I'm just saying it, okay? The meta has adapted to be better against D6 Warlock.
Darek, whenever we come to these Masters tours and I'm like, okay, I get to cast with like Darek and Gia, these other like big brain casters, I'm going to get away from all these horrible takes that I have to deal with on a daily basis, and then you tell me that Shadow Priest beats D6 Warlock. Come on, what are you...
I didn't say it beats it. I said it's getting harder. Okay.
Okay.
Come on. It got Lorinda out of 4 digits. All of your arguments are invalid, Soft.
That's true. Yeah, no, that is true. I genuinely, my opinion on Shadow Priest changed. I thought it was, you know, just a very, very... Well, I mean, I guess this part didn't change. I thought it was a brain dead deck, and I thought it was also quite a bad deck. But then both Raven and Lorinda climbed to 3-digit legend with it. And I was like, well, if it can do that, the brain dead part checks out, but I'm not so sure it can be bad.
Well, here we go. Meati getting himself off to, obviously, the good start. He gets himself free mission. He gets Stealer of Souls plus 2 mana Matron. Combo ready to go next turn. Lethal? Question mark?
Yeah, I mean, he can start popping off without coin and preserve the coin, right? Preserve the coin, right? Like, the issue is that he'll have to get into Dark Glare, the second Dark Glare for Blood Banner in a timely fashion to have any chance. It's possible if the cards are in a very nice sequence and he doesn't get Soul Fragments in his deck until much later. He has a chance.
Oh, the backfire! That's so sick! Oh, this is like the perfect sequence of draws. He completes quest, gets himself a bit of board, and of course the backfire, just absolutely ludicrous. If he can get a Dark Glare now, we're cooking.
We are indeed. This backfire outcome is going to be huge because he will need the Dark Glare sooner rather than later, because he is going to need to get some of these other cards out the left-hand side of his hand and particularly get up to the 3 mana again to get the second Dark Glare in play. And then the world is your playground at that point when you have 2 Dark Glares in play. He's rifling through this, but at this point I think he is just drawing dry because without the Dark Glare he can't get to that other backfire in his hand, so he is going to have to stop there.
Yeah, that's right. He could have completed quest on this turn and gotten Tamsin in hand by playing the Unstable on a 3 health minion, I think was exact quest completion. But I think quite correctly realizing there's no need. It's free, so you can just play this Unstable Fellbolt next turn, potentially with a Dark Glare as well, which I think is quite smart.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the other part that, like, this is just a monstrous board as well, right?
That's
like,
true.
People forget. Of course, the meme is that, like, the board doesn't matter, but there's no real reason for Meati to just blow up his own board here with School Spirits and Unstable Shadow Bolt to be able to complete the quest. So he can just threaten the board here. I believe TIZS was a Minari Mosha gamer, right? So there's not even the threat of Soul Rend coming back the other way. So this board just sticks and just attacks in a lot of worlds against TIZS' hand, which has ended up being pretty slow.
Oh, he's clearing, he's clearing, he's clearing. At least get some cards out of his hand as well, so he can go, what, double free admission next turn, hopefully pop off himself the turn after. But it's starting to look a little shaky.
Turn after, imagine.
Yeah, true.
Imagine
true.
there being a turn after.
I mean, at the moment, like, Meati is winning this game. I'm not trying to argue that, of course. But if there was any wriggle room for TIZS, there's no red mana Stealer of Souls in hand. Both the Backfire and the Hand of Gul'dan cost actual mana. Like,
True.
I would say it's unlikely that TIZS is going to die next turn, right?
Oh, sorry, my bad. It was Meati that had the Minari Mosha, and TIZS did actually have the Soul Rend in the deck. That is my mistake. TIZS just says he has to believe here. He's that far behind, and I absolutely agree with that assessment. Needs to hit big. That's bullshit. Okay.
Complete whiff.
Oh! Oh, coin! Backfire! Get out of my game!
Yeah, pretty illegal, right? There are, again, not that many good draws with the other hand being in hand, but at this point, it just doesn't matter. Yeah, this'll do. You can't gain mana, of course, once Tamsin is down with the way that Dark Glare works. But it just doesn't matter. I mean, he's just close to fatigue, honestly, at this point, like the ultimate win con in the deck with tap and hands next turn.
Mm-hmm. And I think having seen... Well, actually, there is a little bit of danger here. Because with TIZS' first play being Stealer Tap, there might still be a little fear, I suppose, from Meati that the rest of the hand is Stealer Backfire, right? And that TIZS actually has a shot of fully going off this turn. But he can do such a monstrous amount of damage with the amount of cards that he drew, even though it doesn't end up being quite lethal, that he has to do this on 4 HP, even if the hand were there. And we can see Derek, the hand absolutely is not there.
Yeah, not even remotely possible, right? You can hit Soul Rend, mill your entire deck to get yourself closer to fatigue, but you are just dead every single time, right? Are there any draws, like even with a tap, 2 cards for Meati? Yeah, I think it's over.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can dig yourself out of jail with a hand like this with like Stealer into free admission, and you also have hand in your hand, right? And then the free admission can draw a Nightshade, but that's more mana than TIZS has now. He'd need more discounts than he has now, and he'd need cards that he just doesn't even have at this point. So just in a world of pain. That should just about wrap it up.
Yeah, there we go. Shoots his own minion. That'll do it. Meati finally getting a win on the board after a pretty miserable start with his Weapon Rogue. Now, of course, has the Glide Brute Demon Hunter, one of his self-described bad matchups for the D6 Warlocks. Okay, that's a potential tick if we're being generous. And then the Weapon Rogue as well isn't bad either. You very often kill them before they can get the combo down. Was the Warlock the weakest deck all along in the series? Is getting that win all that matters?
I mean, I think whenever you have a lineup that comes into this tournament and doesn't ban the Warlock on the other side, be it Handlock or be it D6, right? That's at least part of their thinking, is that I've been talking about how all these decks have come into the game that have evolved to have good matchups. Obviously, Meati is also playing D6 Warlock himself, so he has a mirror, but a lot of players who are experienced with the deck as Meati is will feel fairly comfortable in that mirror. But if you look at the rest of the lineup, Meati has a Glide Demon Hunter of his own. He has Self-Sharpening Sword. He has Weapon Rogue, which, according to Meati, is not favoured, but he's baiting 100%. He doesn't think that. Ignore him. And then the other deck is Druid, Celestial Alignment Druid. So when he was talking about the possible counters, he has that counter lineup, right? That is his lineup. as a whole. So I think it's very possible that Meati feels like he can reverse sweep this series against the D6 Warlock. But D6 Warlock is a very scary deck to do that against. We've seen this historically, and I think us as casters always get into this debate. Whenever there's a best deck in the game, the idea of Conquest is kind of always rooted in this idea that if there's one deck that's so powerful that you know it's going to be in everyone's lineup, then you should be able to target that deck. But sometimes that deck is just so good that that target strategy doesn't work because you need 80% matchups across the board to be favored 3 times in a row. Did that many decks have 80% win rate against D6 Warlock? Remains to be seen.
I'm going to say no. And I'm going to say as well that if he was expecting a very high percentage of D6 Warlock, it's kind of a misread. Over half the players have Handlock as their version of Warlock. Only, 33% bringing the D6 version, which is still a sizable percentage, of course. And it's not to say that Meati only has good matchups against the D6 Warlock. I think that against the control lineups, he's obviously just absolutely laughing. And with the... Okay, pretty funny. Against the aggro decks, he still has a decent chance because his lineups aren't terrible. But I agree, potentially a slight misread of what the meta was likely to be from Meati.
I was actually laughing because if I just had to go on a read based on TIZS' face and his eyes in particular, I'd say he might be struggling a little bit with the time zone we're playing in this tournament because he had some very droopy eyelids at various points over those first couple of turns.
You would be wrong. That's just TIZS.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. He is he doesn't appear to be an especially enthusiastic gamer when he's on camera. I mean, obviously you are correct. I'm sure the time zone is not helping his energy levels, but he's a reserved guy. Doesn't not overly expressive when he's playing.
They're just Weapon Rogue. Weapon Rogue, I sleep. D6 Warlock, real. You can.
Yeah. I can imagine. These 1/3s in the way. Annoying. Not all too much more. I mean, again, it's going to stop 5 health, which is a pretty big deal. But as it currently stands, TIZS is just taking way too much damage for a hand that doesn't have free admission in it.
Yep, and this is the problem. You cannot really, realistically, kill D6 Warlock before they build the hand that pops off and potentially OTKs you.
Yeah.
The problem with facing a deck like Weapon Rogue is that you don't need to kill them. You just need to do about 20 damage, and they just don't have the health resources to be able to take the amount of damage they need to take in order to complete the quest. So that's why this matchup is a big uphill struggle for the D6 Warlock.
I did actually just have to check whether Garrote could hit a minion. Like, I've obviously only ever seen it go face, but I just was wondering, does it have to go face, or is that just deal 2 damage to be able to clear off one of the 1/3s? Obviously, I am just being stupid.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Obviously. But here we go. Meati going with the game plan that you...
pointing that card, Derek. You ever pointed a Garrote? No, never.
I mean, I haven't played Garrote in quite a while. Kind of lost interest after the auctioneer version fell by the wayside. But for Meati, the game plan, we don't see all too much of churning through your self-sharpening sword so quickly that you just go with the tusk afterwards, and there's still plenty of time to get a whole bunch of charges out of it.
Yeah, still a surprising amount of time left in the game. Good chance that Meati maybe uses up 2 weapon swings here, depending on what the draw is off the top. You might be expecting a little bit of healing coming out this turn from TIZS, but certainly TIZS is not looking at a hand that's going to get him anywhere near a win condition here, and he just don't have the tools to wall a deck out on the other side long term. Like, you have some healing, you have some control tools, but without a Tamsin in your deck, for example, like a 1/3 Tamsin like Handlock has, it's just, there's no chance that you can just heal for enough to send the game for a long distance once you get to this kind of point.
Yeah, it's not even close. Like, Warlock does not even have that much healing in it. Like, it has enough to heal for, like, I don't know, 15, maybe 20 if you're being generous. But beyond that, it gets very, very difficult to be able to heal for more than that. And as we know, even in the old days with, like, Control Warrior, Control Priest, none of them could out-armor or out-heal the Weapon Rogue. It just has infinite damage.
Meati just says, this is the most damage I'll ever be threatened with. I'm just going to drop this Cloak of Shadows right now, and he's probably right to do so.
Yeah, of course means that TIZS has to target his own minions realistically to be able to heal back out of range. One of the worst feelings in any kind of Warlock deck. But of course, a mandatory play here, I think, for TIZS to have any chance.
It's going to backfire here. He has 2 Mortal Coils that he can go drawing with, but he probably wants to allocate one of those 1 health minions to be hit with a touch instead, just to get the guaranteed healing instead of digging for the soul fragments.
Okay, this is pretty cute. This is a pretty cool play that he is going for here. In order to get that down on the same turn, he can, of course, keep drawing on this turn if he wants to. Good lord.
Okay. That's going to be another 3 healing.
Oh, misses the Dark Lair anyway.
Yeah. Oh, his other Dark
Oh, he's
Lair.
played both, sorry. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. He can heal all the way back up to 14. That was an incredibly productive Hearthstone turn from TIZS, it has to be said. Whether or not it'll end up being enough remains to be seen, but that was about the best he could possibly hope to achieve that turn. Garrote drawn. Still not quite there, I don't think.
You can draw a card off of the swing, 2 cards off of the cutting class. Like, do you ever just go Guild Trader, prep Garrote, swing? You can get in the Sinister Strike as well. If you draw a Deadly Poison, you can play the cutting class as well, because it acts as a coin. But there are a lot of good draws in your deck, and you're doing so much damage.
I have played enough D6 Warlock to know that I do not want to give my Warlock opponent another turn here, because they can make miracles happen.
Yeah,
Some
exactly.
of those soul fragments that have gone in the deck. So I think if you have a way to fish for lethal, you should absolutely do it this turn.
Oh, wow, really? Oh, well, then.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the ordering was interesting there, right? With the Garrote being cast before the Trader, and then the swing going in before the Trader as well, with the bleeds in the deck. But in the end, the Sinister Strike being drawn, which were obviously out. Wicked Stab could be found, Sinister Strike.
Exactly, yeah.
2 preps could just be used for straight up lethal that way. So there were different outs depending on which way you approach the turn. But it's probably one of those turns that various people would debate back and forth on terms of what the statistically optimal sequencing is to be able to achieve lethal there.
Does get it though, which takes us all the way to game 5. At the end of it all, it's just the D6 Warlock once again for TIZS and the Demon Hunter for Meati. He's won the mirror, he's finally got a win with his Weapon Rogue, and now... Oh no, sorry, it's not the Brute version from him. I apologize. He is playing the full-on OTK variant instead, with just straight up Il'gynoth in there. How do I feel about this one?
I've actually played a chunk of this deck, both accidentally and on purpose since the nerf, because I have been playing quite a lot of Demon Hunter recently, so I have a lot of different Demon Hunters built on my account, and went to try out Brute Demon Hunter, and accidentally just queued the OTK Demon Hunter that I had built from before the nerf, and then ended up just playing a game with it, won that game, and ended up thinking, hang on a sec, this actually just didn't feel that bad, to be honest.
Right.
And then just let it just go by the wayside for a day or two while I was jamming some Brutes. And then saw on Twitter, saw a couple of opponents myself, sort of around 150-ish legend, and then saw some people being on stream playing against people just playing this deck, just 30 for 30 card, so apart from Glide being thrown in. The pre-expansion OTK Demon Hunter, and so I tried it out myself again, just putting in those glides to make up the odds, and it's honestly very strong. It's extremely punishing against a lot of decks, not in the least the Brute Demon Hunter, right? I think these decks do very, very similar things, but one of them is able to just play a board of some 6/7s or 7/8s, and the other one is able to blow them up very, very easily. And then when it comes down to the late game, one of the win conditions with, up to 36, 48 damage if you super high roll with discounts now with the Il'gynoth is a lot better than just, swinging with a Lion's Roar once for 20 damage. So I'm actually kind of a fan of this bring, as much as I hate giving Meati this much credit. I think he's possibly onto a winner here with this OTK Demon Hunter.
I know, again, it's one of the most horrible feelings in competitive Hearthstone is admitting that Meati might have been right when he tweeted out that Demon Hunter was actually still rank 1, to which I posted the meme of setting my watch to his terrible takes again on Twitter. I do now have to eat humble pie, I think, because when I saw last week of GM Give Please bringing this version of Demon Hunter, to be honest, I kind of thought he'd forgotten that there had been any nerfs, because it was the exact same list, as you said, but just with glides. And one of the things I really like about this new build, even apart from how good I think it is it's just a very liberating version of Demon Hunter to play, because beforehand with the Quest OTK Demon Hunter, you were thinking, oh, are these discounts good enough? Do I want to complete this turn of the quest? Do I want to look for more combo pieces? This one, you just turbo draw, you get Kurtrus, you play Glide, and then you win, because Guild Trader always costs 0. Your Il'gynoth very often is going to cost 4 after that point. You just hyper draw through your deck, and that's often a very valid win con.
Not to mention the matchups where you get to make the forbidden play, the most satisfying play in Hearthstone, Derek, which is just playing Il'gynoth as a giant on board. It's the nuts.
Oh.
You just play it. You just play it, and it's got 8 health, and no one kills it. It just starts smacking them for 8. Such a good...
He big now.
Yep.
What are you going to do? Meati raising his eyebrows as, you know, this is... I mean, it's not an especially difficult Hearthstone to sequence when you run it through, but it's just got too many good options. The weapon and the sigil, this is exactly what you're looking for in a Hearthstone turn. But that's even
going to be looking for, though, is the runed Mithril Rod into free admission on the other side. Like, I'll say there is a little bit of a caveat that TIZS just kind of drew patches that turn by hitting the minion for full cost, particularly with it being Stealer of Souls. But that's one of the things that the weapon helps to mitigate, right? Because between runed Mithril Rod and then free admission, 4 cards. A little bit of sick in the mouth, Derek. A little bit of sick in the mouth.
Heart.
Sorry. Yeah. Now these free admissions are going to give him a full hand of minions that are going to cost functional 0 at the end of all of this. This is about as good a draw as it's possible to get with D6.
Man, Meati's not far off, though, in the turbo nuts draw. Like, double sigil, completing the quest on 3, almost certainly completing the quest on 4 as well. Like, this could be quest, Kurtrus. And, you know, again, this is a deck with Glide. We have to bear that in mind. As good as TIZ's hand is, it may be enough to get there.
But that's the big kicker, right? You said Turbo Quest. Not only was it Turbo Quest, it's Turbo Quest coin out a Viper to destroy the weapon, and then he just rips the second one. This is full-blown 29th episode of the arc in Dragon Ball Z. All the powering up and screaming is over, and they are just firing energy blasts at each other at full power. This is both of these decks' final form at this point.
But Carrot Cake might have died here because Skull of Gul'dan, 1 mana too expensive to be played.
His name's Meati. How can he be a carrot cake? What do you mean?
Yeah, a bit of a rough Illidari studies there, as obviously his card draw has completely dried up. He could still just play Skull next turn to draw 3, but that doesn't even complete the quest as it currently stands.
Right. Now the big turns start to come online for TIZS. Does hit Stealer Matron. So no Dark Layers as of yet, but he does have that lined up with Backfire on the following turn. Now for a sum total of 3 mana. No Stealer Backfire on the following turn.
Yeah, I guess you're probably doing that. Do you go Stealer, Backfire,
you can do it all right.
And yeah, you can just do everything.
Well, you can free admission first for the Dark Layer and then just do everything together. Yeah, it all works because everything gets so cheap.
Yeah, it's just that doesn't complete the Mithril Rod if you go free admission first.
Second tick. Yeah.
Backfire wouldn't actually either, destroying 1 card here. I guess it's like a tiny bit more complicated than just playing your hand, but again, he does just have the absolute juice here.
There's room in the darkness for you.
Dealer, free admission. Doesn't matter how much mana these minions are going to cost anyway, because you're paying them for free, and then you can just drop the Backfire at the end of this. guaranteed at least one Dark Lair here. He did only get one of them. Doesn't really matter because he doesn't have that much in his hand that he cares about playing for real mana at this point anyway. Insta second Dark Lair, and he is off to the races this turn. The fear now, though, is this is the OTK Demon Hunter matchup, right? And Meati has several discounted cards in hand. If those cards are exactly Il'gynoth, Moarg, Fellscream Blast, etc., the capability of doing a lot of damage here and fulfilling the Indiana Jones meme of you just swinging your swords around wildly and getting shot in the face is possible. So if you lose confidence that you're going to kill your opponent in this matchup, you should bail and heal as much as you possibly can and make that your main focus.
I mean, you are right, but there's only actually 2 discounted cards left in hand, right, if he's been keeping track, which is essentially impossible to kill you. Like, if they have
True, yeah.
Il'gynoth plus Fellscream Blast, like, that's kind of the most they can do on this turn. So it's obviously a valid point, and I absolutely agree. But in this particular instance, I think TIZS was fine to stay above. You know, as long as he stays above 4, he's fine.
Yeah. Which, you know, easier said than done sometimes, but you are absolutely right.
Well, I mean, there is the Il'gynoth. We were just talking about tempo Il'gynoth as a game plan. Any consideration for it whatsoever?
It just doesn't stick, though, does it? That's the problem.
Doesn't really.
Can't clear up enough of the board. You have to take care of this Stealer. There's no way you're living next turn if you don't kill this Stealer. We know. Actually, I mean, I suppose with the amount of free admissions that have been played and how cheap the whole hand is from the double rod proc, it honestly doesn't even matter that much. But yeah, I think short version, Meati's looking real dead.
Acrobatics, you still have I-Beam plus Talented Arcanist is 1 mana too expensive. That doesn't even clear it. He just has to go Arcanist Imbo. Yeah. Oh.
Yep.
Horrible turn. Absolutely horrible. The only saving grace for him here is that TIZS doesn't have any card draw. Currently available with no hand, no backfire. But boy, is he tapping. Wow, okay. That's second Stealer on the board with no card draw.
Yep. Suddenly, a game of Hearthstone has appeared, Derek.
Did he need to go Stealer there? Like, can you not just go tap and then wait until you have hand or backfire? Because you don't even have to play the hand, right? You can just play the Matron, draw a million cards and win that way.
Yep, very true. I don't know how much of it is the fear of OTK Demon Hunter on the other side, like feeling like you have to win this turn.
Oh! He passes,
the glide.
and then it's a glide. Oh my goodness.
But can he... Like, he has to kill the Stealer first before he glides or achieves nothing. So, I mean, if anything, you're improving TIZS' hand from his perspective at that point.
I grow impatient.
I guess, yeah, I guess.
How about doing that?
I guess you just... Oh, maybe you don't glide. You can go acrobatics. Like, you're almost certainly going to find a way to kill it.
Oh, God. This is such a hard turn. Yeah, he's just going to drop the
just
IB.
Doing it.
Rip the glide. Yeah. He's going to find a way to deal with it. He does get second I-beam, but as you can see, this is a hand now chock full of goodness.
Oh, the Hand of Gul'dan. This is going to be so close because he has the card draw. All of these damaging himself is obviously very, very good. But there's no more Stealer of Souls. Meati is at 30 health. And TIZS is obviously a million miles away from fatigue.
Is that a mana cost matron off the top? Okay, that's interesting. Ooh. That one does cost mana. Don't get baited by the little red droplet.
Alright, that's Tamsin ready to go.
Yep. Plenty of fragments in the deck, I believe. Not entirely sure of the exact amount.
All of Stormwind shall share my pain.
Any, though. He's just on 5.
I okay, I mean, you can do a little bit of damage. You can obviously heal up for 7 with Drain Soul, Touch of the Nathrazim on your Matron, which looks like what he's leading up for. Probably a smart play.
Absolutely, yeah. Agree with this. You're not really in the business of building a board and threatening lethal here. You're just trying to dodge lethals on the other side.
Insta-glide, yeah. Not all too interested in doing it to your opponent's hand. I don't think it really matters either way, to be honest.
Every time.
That Il'gynoth
has just come back every single time.
I mean, that's really bad. Like, you want to draw that off the Kurtrus, right, so that you can get a cheaper combo. But having said that now, next turn, like, Meati is 2 turns off from doing the combo. But TIZS is not doing that much damage. There's still healing available to Meati. I think he might get there.
There's a fragment, though, finally, for TIZS, getting that little bit of extra healing.
Yeah.
He does have Shadow Blast, Mortal Coil to be able to draw a card here. He really wants to start hitting what? There's still 1 hand, 1 backfire left in his deck, right? In the bottom 7 cards that can push him towards Fatigue, which is where he wants to be at this point, to be able to deal the damage.
That's a very good point. But how much do you want to get the Unstable Shadow Bolt to actually do damage, though, right? Like, what if you go...
Yeah.
I don't know, Soul Rend Shadow Bolt? Probably bad, because the health on your Tamsin's actually very relevant here, but... like, Nightshade Matron, attack in, and then Shadow Bolt. Like, there's a lot of different ways that you can try and maximize your damage. Because, as you say, drawing cards kind of equals damage in the long run.
I'll tell you what, Derek, he has to do something, and he has to have done it about 15 seconds ago at this point. Like, there is still so much potentially to do this turn if he hits a draw chain. He doesn't, in the end, just ends up ripping the Soul Fragments into his deck. But now Meati has a chance. He's out of natural glides to get that Il'gynoth back in the deck and rediscount it potentially. But there is still that Illidari Studies potentially on the far left. But it looks like he's going to go Acrobatics Digging instead. That's insane, but there's currently nothing to duplicate with that philosophy.
Oh my god, he can draw a gajillion cards this turn. Like, he has to have lethal next turn, right? He just absolutely has to. The Moarg, you can copy that. This is so easily lethal next turn.
Yeah, the Philosophy can now copy the Moarg, and it still has the Acrobatics Aura on it, which means it's drawing 2 more cards.
Do you even want to draw cards? Like, I mean, I guess you need to survive, right? All you need to do is clear the Tamsin, heal if you can.
True. Healing's actually a really big deal here as well, right? Just getting like a nice boost of healing this turn, that's a very big deal for you.
Yeah. That's going to draw 2 more cards. Oh my god, it's so much damage.
Yeah, just take the Fell Scream, right?
Yeah, this is smart. It's still lethal with the Guild Trader double Moarg Fell Scream. Heals up, gets rid of the Tamsin. 1 final turn for TIZS to win the game. He needs that card draw.
Fragments, that's nothing. That's a Soul Shear off the top, so it's going to have to be the tap to start.
Oh, but what if you go Soul Rend? If you go Soul Rend, tap, backfire?
Don't the cards in his deck fatigue him more by drawing them on average, though, with the remainder of the deck that he has?
But does he have enough mana?
I mean, I guess then he has to pay for them, yeah.
Right. Yes, also, sometimes in D6 Warlock, you actually have to spend your mana.
Unacceptable. Never make me pay mana for cards in this deck.
I just don't know. Like, a third of his deck is insane.
It goes all the way back to that second push with the second Stealer, right? And whether that was a little bit aggressive from TIZS, whether he could have held on to it for a couple of extra turns. Choosing to take the healing here, which I think is almost always 100% irrelevant, right? Like in terms of killing these minions with healing.
This never matters, right? Like, your opponent...
burning, there's so much left to do!
He gets the backfire as well with the fragments. Oh my goodness. Yeah, he's drawing through as quick as he can, trying to heal up more with the fragments. Maybe if he can get above like 24 as the break point, he's thinking that might be enough if it's a really awkward bottom card Guild Trader or something like that. But I don't know, man. I don't see it.
Unbelievable game of Hearthstone. What a way to end out the series, but that is going to be the crisp 36, the Demon Hunter Classic. Nerfs? What nerfs? This deck's just still good.
It's insane, and Meatman is king. An insane 3-0 comeback over the D6 Warlock to turn things around from a 2-0 start. The full reverse sweep. My man is over the moon, as he should be. His mouth is literally agape.
I mean, what a man. That's your poster boy for Hearthstone right there. That's the future. You're looking at it. That is what peak performance looks like. Meati in his kitchen, jamming OTK Demon Hunter as if nothing had been nerfed at all, and absolutely getting there in what looked like the most unlikely of circumstances. Because rewind 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however long that game was, we were just freaking out about how perfect TIZS' opening hand was.
Yeah.
Right? And even after the first weapon destruction came down, the second one was there to just line it up, and it looked like the hand was just going to be too good to beat again. But again, I think I had several questions about TIZS play overall throughout that game and that series in general, but I think the big one is whether or not that second stealer needed to go in as early as it possibly did, which is easy to say in the results-oriented world where it whiffed, right? If he just tapped and found some card draw, his deck was stacked with card draw at that point, so I can understand going for it. And maybe if he'd hit the skull, we'd have just glossed over it, right? And said, yeah, of course, you kill him, it's fine. But I think certainly when you end up losing that series from that position, that might just be a turn that you have to go back and look at in post when you're reviewing your series in the Masters Tour.
I will say, as the APAC representative here, I think that TIZS did play one pretty miraculous turn, actually, with the D6 Warlock against the Weapon Rogue, where he, got the surprise Stealer of Souls down, started drawing cards. If there was ever a way to win that game, I wouldn't have found it, and I think he gave himself the best chance possible. But I do agree. I think there was slight damage inefficiency in the Weapon Rogue mirror, as you said at the end there. The Stealer of Souls turn, it was just so optimistic. Like, it had to be 3 cards out of 20 left in his deck to be able to get the win there. Didn't work out for him, but Meati, I think, very deservedly getting the win there, as he did play his absolute heart out. We are not quite done with round 3 yet, done with our initial match, but when we come back from this break, still plenty of action all around the tavern as we cross the halfway point for the day. We'll be right back with some more action.
Welcome back, everyone, to Masters Tour Silvermoon. We are going to cover some more matches from round 3. Derek, welcome back, even though you didn't really go anywhere. How's the Masters Tour going so far for you?
Oh, I'm loving it. I just love this metagame. I think on ladder, I've approaching the top of Legend, or my ceiling of mid-top 100s. I can see how queuing into the right matchups can become a little bit daunting. It's not the funnest trying to find the correct matchup for if you're queuing Priest and trying to avoid Shaman or whatever.
Right.
But in the tournament, I think it's just such an interesting metagame. Again, we're seeing different lineups every single round. I'm still far from convinced as to what the best deck is, let alone what the best overall lineup is, as D6 Warlock sometimes looking very powerful, sometimes getting swept, as we saw with TIZS versus Meati in the previous series. Aggro's looking strong, I think combos looking strong, and although there aren't really control lineups, there are anti-aggro lineups, I suppose would be a more appropriate term, and they also look pretty strong.
That's it, isn't it? I think this Masters Tour, at least for the first one in a long time, where I feel like there's not 2 lineups or maybe 3 lineups that are the option. It's just like, what are people going to bring? I mean, already I feel like almost every match we've seen just on stream has been different lineups clashing against each other with different decks, different archetypes, and so on. And this will be no different. We are diving into game number 3 between a Maverick and Wolf Warriors 2, the famous sequel to Wolf Warriors. But here we go. A Maverick, a player that has been around a long time now, as you can see. Has won various cups dating back to 2014. Maverick has, maybe not been in the limelight all the time, but he's always been around doing pretty well at worst, I think.
Yeah, exactly. He's one of those players, similarly to Wyra is often considered this as well. Well, I mean, because they are often assigned to the wrong country, as Wyra also is, not being a German person, as of course Maverick is often mistaken for a French player, given that he is so closely intertwined with the Solari players. But also just that he's a very firm practice partner of a lot of players who seem to have mostly done a bit better. But that is turning around. As we saw, I still remember his win in DreamHack way back in 2018. But now getting a runner-up spot at a Masters Tour is something that very few players can boast. And so I still absolutely believe him to be one of the best players in the French practice group scene, and also just in Europe as well, you could argue, as the field seems to be drawing closer and closer together.
Yeah, and we take a look at what Maverick is going to be playing in this game number 3. Is that Shadow Priest, a deck for the true greats, in my opinion, and one that only fantastic people play way too much on ladder. I heard Salt's comments earlier, and all I can reply to that is, he tweeted today he was going to be nice. That didn't last long, did it? But we could see the Warlock and the Demon Hunters band out for both players here. Wolf Warriors 2 is going to be playing this Warlock with a slight sprinkling of a difference in there with Altar of Fire. I know you've been playing a lot of Warlock, Derek, but have you played with Altar of Fire at all? Have you given it a try, or have you stuck to the more standard non-Altar versions?
I've tried it. I mean, it obviously makes sense in the list, right? Because in so many matchups, there's 2 very distinct game plans I find with this handlock. One is the handlock part, right? Where you go tap, tap, Netheron, Flesh Giant, Goldshire, Null. That's generally the plan in the Mirror, against Druid, against Mage, against Demon Hunter, basically all the non-aggro decks. And then there's the other game plan, which is tap a little bit, heal as much as you can, and try to get a big Soul Rend, a big backfire, so that you can draw down until you have 10 or less cards in your deck, and then you just win. When you play Bloodshard, Bristleback, and Baron Scavenger against aggro decks, there's essentially no aggro deck that can stand up against that. And Altar of Fire helps you get there. It comes at the cost of a Mortal Coil, I think, as the obvious swap out in this matchup, which I don't know if I necessarily think I like that more. I do personally like Mortal Coil, just because of its flexibility. It works with Thalnos and the Tour Guides if you want to use it on your own minions, and of course it just works on opponents' minions. And I would say that generally playing the Altar of Fire is mostly an anti-aggro card to get through to that late game position, as I said, with the Bloodshard Bristlebacks and the Baron Scavengers.
It's very interesting as well, because one of the other cards I've seen cut is some players play 1 Unstable Shadow Blast that you can see in Wolf's hand now. And For me, the choice between, if you're saying those two are like the cuttable cards to an extent, the choice really is just purely depending on what you're expecting to face. And my answer is good luck in this tournament, because I don't know what you're expecting to face, so it will probably come down to that personal preference. But let's dive straight in. Both players 1-1. Of course, we are jumping in kind of halfway through this series in round number 3, and we can see the draw there for Maverick to kick off is not fantastic, not only because Tour Guide isn't really the most powerful one-drop in the non-aggro mirrors, I think it's quite a good one-drop in the aggro ones, but also the Orc Merchant next turn doesn't really work with a 1-health minion to give it Divine Shield, so a little bit slow there overall, and honestly, just a slow hand from Maverick, and I feel against Warlock, you don't want this kind of hand even though it's high value, you want to throw everything on the board and get them before they have the time.
Yeah, it's all kinds of clunky, isn't it? He does technically have like the highest win rate card in the Mulligan, which is Gandling. It's pretty much the highest Mulligan win rate card in every matchup, apart from maybe the Void Touched Attendant in
I was going to say Lucia.
Yes, sure. I mean, drawn win rate, yes, I think Lucia is going to be higher up than that. But the Wriggling Horror, again, it's a little bit awkward, but I think it's tiding him through. It's getting him to the point where if he gets Gandling and 1 or 2 0 drops, he can at least put Wolf Warriors on a check where he has to say, if you don't have Soul Rend, you're going to be in some big, big trouble.
And this is the tough part you can see now on Wolf's side of the board here, is the choices you have to make against Priest, even with this kind of opening, is tough, because tapping is what your deck wants to do. It helps you get to the quest, draws cards, helps you get these giants, these nulls active. But while you're doing that, you are getting punched in the face. So even that decision, you can see the null coming out now from Wolf.
Wow.
And it's okay, but that will just mean it's a hero power away from Maverick to just keep pushing damage, and Maverick will have 2 mana spare.
Yeah, it was a very interesting starting hand for Wolf Warriors, because you can argue that the play should have been Cult Neophyte into Backfire. Obviously that's weak to Neophyte on the other side, as we saw here, and it means you're not tapping for a turn. But if you go tap Backfire, you overdraw a card, which in the aggro matchups you don't really want to do, because you want to make sure you're getting an advantage out of every damage you're dealing to yourself. But I think this line he went for does make sense. It just tries to immediately clear off as much damage on the board as possible. But given that as I'm talking, oh my goodness, he's already lost over half his health. This matchup is just moving way too fast for Wolf Warriors. He's just not even close to stabilizing.
And this is the problem, isn't it? When you, like I said, tapping makes sense with the deck, but even if you're facing down just anything in the early game against Shadow Priest, it's terrifying. And suddenly, Maverick's come out on top here, because not only was that last turn of the Tour Guide a pretty good draw, because it allowed him to not only spend all his mana, but also maximize damage output. Now he's got exactly double Death Imp and Ganling for the refill. So even if Wolf Warriors manages to clear this up, or at least mostly clear this up, there's a huge turn coming as a response, and without exactly Soul Rend, perfect timing.
Okay.
He's going to be in huge trouble. The Soul Rend is there, so now I think the onus will be on Ganling survives the Soul Rend naturally, of course, and then also the Neophyte has Divine Shield, so there's still some protection there. Is he just going to Elucia? I mean, this makes sense, right?
Imagine playing Gandling. I mean, yeah, this is just a lot. This is the best possible top deck in his deck, and why Elucia is just so utterly broken in this deck. Like, I am begging you, something needs to be done to Elucia. I can't take it anymore. Because Wolf Warriors, he'd been setting up this plan. He got the Soul Rend. It looked like he was maybe on the brink of stabilization. And now he's lost. The game is over, and it goes 2-1 to Maverick.
Brutal is the word, and that is the Priest game plan. Of course, it worked out very well. Maverick already had the Ganling, which is fantastic, of course, with the double Imp, but you are right, with Elucia there, that's the sort of secret sauce of the deck, and why Elucia's in there. You might think, oh, he could have played the Neophyte. Why? There's no relevant spells that he's going to draw. There's literally nothing your opponent can do to your board when you give them your deck. So huge win there for Maverick, and honestly, it's kind of just the 1, 2, 3 of how that matchup goes. In a lot of cases, I do think it's one that's very good for the Priest.
I agree. It's one of the weirdest learning curves for me is that, like, when I started playing Handlock instead of D6 Warlock a little bit more, I was thinking, oh, great, surely I'm going to dominate Priest now. I've got all these healing spells. You've got Tamsin in there as well. You can play 1 mana 5/4s with Rush. You can play 1 mana 6/6s with Taunt later on. It's just a little bit too slow. You always feel like you're 1 turn away from stabilizing, turning things around, because unless they have a truly awful starting hand,
Right.
I just think they got off to too quick of a start, especially when you're tapping through your early turns.
Yeah, really, really tough one there for Wolf Warriors, but he does have his own Priest and his Warlock to, try and get wins over this Hunter from Maverick. And again, Face Hunter deck that we've seen sort of in and out, and Maverick's bringing a really weird list as well, just looking at this. And not even weird bad, just weird different. He's got the 1 Orc Merchant in there, double Argent Squire, and double Bone Chewer Brawler, which is a bit of a throwback to the Highlander Hunters that always played it as well, so we can check that out. And interestingly enough, I think this is an actual good build for the tournament, because these cards, I feel, help you out versus the likes of Shaman a little bit, but also versus the Priest matchup as well, because these minions are a little bit stickier than normal, and it's just more early game, because as you can see, Priest doesn't give you a lot of time, so it's a little bit scary.
Yeah, I can see it. Obviously, it comes at the expense of Rhinos and the 4-drop again, which I am forgetting the name of. I apologize. The Wrangler, yeah, there we go. Which is a bit of a weird one, right? Because in a way, it can be a very, very good card. Like, it's the way to lock out the matchup against D6 Warlock at the end a lot of the time, where they have to leave some minions on board. They often have to damage their own minions in order to get there. But there are a few decks that just don't play minions all that much, at which point, as you said, more minion development at the start of the game makes a lot of sense. You're going to bolster your matchup against Druid quite drastically, I think, because Bone Chewer Brawler plus Org Merchant is essentially just GG at that point versus Druid. They can't really kill that off, and then they have to take a million. And I think this is a pretty cool way to go about it. The only other time I've seen players cutting Rhino was for Bear Sharks, which I thought was also a pretty cool inclusion. That was in more of the Mage metagame, where that made a lot of sense, because Mage just could not interact with the buffed Bear Shark. But for this version, you know what? I'm on board with it. I'm willing to believe Maverick for this one.
And I think that's one of the approaches where we talk about how sort of crazy the meta is right now, especially tournament meta, is I think you do just have to pick, like, I'm going to be strong against this, and hope I either dodge that I don't like, or just just be able to grab a win out of nowhere, or ban something out that's tough. And I think you do just have to pick a route, because I think it's impossible, and as you were talking about earlier, to just get, oh, this is just strictly the strongest lineup of decks, because there's so much variety in this Masters Tour that you can't just say my lineup beats everything, because we've just seen that not to be true, right? We've seen different lineups take wins left, right, and center right now. And we are going to see Wolf Warriors on his version of this Shadow Priest, which I believe, is this the one? Oh no, it's the pretty standard list actually, yeah. It's just got the 2 Coulter and Chaplains and 1 Deceptor, as opposed to the other way around that's normally played.
I don't think it should be in a decent spot, right? Like, there is obviously the tremendous amount of burn damage available to the Face Hunter, but on average, I'm finding that now that you are cutting the Kolkar pack runners, your ability to actually dominate those early turns is quite significantly diminished. I think that what Shadow Priest is doing with Homunculus, the Frazzled Freshman, Wriggling Horror to buff those up, it's just that little bit more efficient in those early turns. Not to mention that double 0 drop on turn 1 is a lot of tempo for an aggro deck like Hunter to keep up with.
Yeah, and I think that's why, although I still think Priest is looking pretty good, it's one of the things where I think Maverick's build specifically gives him a bit of a chance, because I think if you're waiting till turn 5 to try and Rhino something against Priest, you've waited too long and you're dead. A lot of the time it's never really enough, because the assumption would be that you've also played a 4-mana 3/4 pass against Priest, which again doesn't achieve enough. So this Bone Chewer Brawler here that he's kept, gets the Walpertinger there, which is a big deal. And like the Argent Squires are all minions that, they're not the strongest singular minions, but they can like stick around. But as you said, the sheer tempo from a 0-mana 1/1, oh, it's the
infinite tempo. Used to be believed it was infinite value. No, it's just infinite tempo. As going first is obviously a huge deal here in these aggro mirrors. Does put Wolf Warriors off to a very nice start, but Maverick has some really blooming high tempo starts himself.
Yeah, I think putting a coin adorable looks pretty good as far as I can see. Just to go as big as possible. The 1/1 will or could trade into the imp, of course, or vice versa on Wolf Warrior's turn. But you're okay because you kind of end up with a 2/2 if Wolf hero powers that down. He's effectively passed his turn, right? Which is good.
Wow.
No,
Doesn't want to coin it out. Like, considering coin adorable infestation on the brawler, or maybe just take an immediate value trade. A little surprising.
It's a little scary as well because to me that gives Wolf time to build up the board that can maybe lay a Wriggling Horror down, which then makes the trades into the buffed brawler easier. So yeah, I'm really surprised because the curve looked pretty good if you used the coin last turn, right?
True. Yeah, I'm just trying to think about any breakpoints that it helps in terms of the homunculus that you could then attack into. Like, you do have aim shot or quick shot, but I think it still works out at 2 attack on board, right?
Yeah, and it's still just killable with a hero power, right? So it's not really... I mean, this is even better now with Aug Merchant, so it's not really done the job. Now there's Homunculus on board, which at the moment Maverick's going to struggle to get through. Like, this is already looking quite bad in what looked like a strong opening for Maverick.
Yeah, it's not looking great, but that card alone, I will say that Renling's Rifle can offer you so much of whatever you need. If you need removal in the form of explosive shot, it can be huge. Just putting down snakes or the pack tactics, even the threat of snakes or pack tactics can be enough to disincentivize your opponent from trading, and that allows you to take all kinds of value trades of your own.
Yeah, and even, you know, we've seen it in some of the matchups where the opponent doesn't care about leaving some small minions up.
Yeah.
Then you can play oh my god, the cages, right? To just to generate an additional minion if they don't trade into them and they're scared of pat tactics. So it's kind of a win-win, and it does pay me. I've talked about in the European broadcast that it does pay me when hunters are cutting Rinlings, because I feel like it's one of the most like cheeky cards to try and like, you know, just get an edge out of nowhere basically.
This is so sick though. Raised Dead for 2 0-cost cards to then go Void Touch plus Voracious Reader. That's so disgusting for the perfect hand dump. Again, Maverick has Rinlings, which is I think the only card even slightly keeping him in the game right now. But my goodness, his Wolf Warrior is still representing a lot of damage, even through an explosive trap here, which he misses.
Yeah, I was going to say, it only keeps him in the game if it's explosive. This might just be too much, Derek, because this is so much damage.
Yeah, Maverick like, oh, maybe he doesn't attack, maybe my opponent's an idiot. No, no such luck.
No, he's not queued into me. Yeah, Mind Spike to put him down to 10. I honestly think Wolf Warriors can just play whatever this turn. The frustration he has now is there's not enough board space to play all these 0 drops.
Right, and obviously the thinking is now is that Maverick surely will get an explosive shot this turn, right? There's only like one that it couldn't be.
Let's find out, because he's going to need one.
And so if he can get that, okay, which he hits, it at least mitigates a lot of the damage on this board. There's 7 coming through then with the hero power as well, which is scary, but not necessarily over, because again, Maverick is dealing more damage with his hero power and his own spells because of the Void Touch Attendant on board.
It's kind of funny, right? Because he will take more damage from the explosives.
Yeah.
But
yeah, exactly.
the Void Touch living, the 1/3 as well, the Voracious Reader living, just means that even though this kills off all these like 1/1s, Wolf Warriors just refills the board, right? And then draws more cards.
Yeah, quick shot hero power next turn is 11. It's close, but just not quite close enough. Too much tempo at the start from Wolf Warriors. And the Neophyte, I think, just locks it out.
Yeah. Yeah, it just stops anything like you mentioned happening, right? And, you know, any shenanigans, which I don't even think are possible at this point. And that was just overwhelming. And again, one of the problems Face Hunter has, and honestly, one of the reasons why I've been playing so much Shadow Priest, because it feels like how Face Hunter should be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It is just the new Face Hunter. Overwhelming power in the early game, enough pressure normally to end games within, 5, maybe 6 turns in most circumstances. So big win there for Wolf Warriors, and that means we are going to have this Warlock against Hunter again. What is generally a good matchup for, historically a good matchup for Hunter, I think it's a little bit closer now just because Hunter feels like it doesn't quite have the power it used to.
Yeah, it's a little closer, isn't it? They struggle to put down quite so threatening of a board when compared to Shadow Priest, of course, because Shadow Priest is all minions. The only thing they can do is develop a board. Whereas for the Hunter, you have all the burn spells, you have Barrack Kodobane, you have Rinling's Rifle. It's all very late game oriented stuff, and I find that the extra burn against Warlock isn't exactly what you're looking for. It can be good, of course, but I think you just want to make it as awkward as possible. Try and make it so that Soul Rend doesn't wipe your board on turn 4, and then you should be able to get the win.
Right.
Having said that, though, the Hunter for Maverick, that Guardian Orc Merchant is an incredibly powerful card versus Warlock. They really struggle to get through Divine Shields, and so that in combination with the Argent Squires, maybe it makes it awkward enough for the Handlock to struggle to get through it all.
And I was going to say, before the mulligan was finished there, it's going to be interesting to see if Wolf Warriors respects the deck enough to keep Soul Rend, and it was the only card he kept, other than Quest, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a big, big deal. He has the Soul Rend locked and loaded. He can tap a little bit, because again, I do feel like, at least right now, Hunter damage is a bit more manageable and expected, as opposed to Priest, which can get out of control very quickly.
But look at this, though. Guardian Orc Merchant diff. With this in his hand or not in his hand, this just takes two drastically different paths. This plus Wriggling Horror on this turn, or maybe even Adorable plus Volpatinger. Either way, it's just so much damage that Wolf Warriors has to go double removal spell, which often means losing healing in order to clear it. Like if you go Drain Soul on there, you don't get the lifesteal. If you go for Touch of Nathrazim first into Drain Soul, you don't get the Touch of Nathrazim effect.
Right. I'm even wondering whether this is actually coin Soul Rend.
I think it's got to be.
Deal with the 5/3 next turn, because then he will have Mortal Coil and Touch.
Like you can possibly get away with tap Tour Guide into Mortal Coin Soul Rend on the next turn. Like you take a lot of damage, but you're gonna have to at some point in this game anyway.
I think for me, I just simplify it as this looks like a Priest opening, and I'm scared of those, so make it not look like one. Soul Rend it away, and then worry about the one big minion next turn, which you literally, or which Wolf Warriors can kill next turn.
Right, but the problem is they're going to play a bunch of stuff next turn, right? Whereas if you go for the Soul Rend next turn, you maybe catch those in the crossfire as well. I'm not even saying necessarily that I think my play is better. I'm just saying that I think at some point you're going to have to tank a lot of damage this game, and so it's probably worth holding off on the Soul Mirror for one more Soul Rend, sorry, for one more turn.
Hold off, going for max card draw. And the buff just has to land on the 5/3, right?
Yeah, you'd think so. Just make it so that Drain Soul doesn't clear it, Mortal Coil plus Touch of Nathrazim doesn't clear it, make it as difficult as possible. And then obviously trade the 1/1 at the end.
Yeah, I was worried for a second, and I was like, you do want to kill that Tour Guide. That Divine Shield is awfully strong right now.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. It's unstable. Can you do this a different way, actually?
No. Right, you just have to do it with Coin Soul Rend, I think.
Yeah. Anything too fancy, I think, just threatens way too much damage the other way, right?
Yeah, you want to use this Touch of Nathrazim to heal up afterwards as well. I guess you could play Null instead to get it in the Raised Dead pool.
It just feels like
okay,
it's
sure.
not going to be better next turn.
Well, it's probably going to be worse, right? Unless you're playing Backfire, which I kind of doubt you are. Because the problem is, again, he'll be at 5 mana. If he had 1 more mana, I think you could theoretically go Backfire and hope to hit exactly Bloodshard Bristleback to heal up for 6. But at this health total, I just don't think you can afford to go Backfire.
Now this is, I think that's 2 games for 2, where Maverick has drawn Felmore around this turn.
Oh, really?
Threat, right? He did it in Priest, right? He played it on one of the last games against Priest. And this is not when you want Felmore. If you don't have that thing on 1 or 2, you don't want to ever see it. It's like that. You want that to be bottom of the deck, because this is so slow now, and now double.
Oh.
And a Flesh Giant can come down this turn.
That's disgusting. You can go... No, you can't fit in a Raised Dead as well. There's not really any... Well, you could, but there's not much point. You don't want to take the extra damage.
Right.
Just heal up, play the Giant, Backfire into Baron Scavenger next turn. Oh.
Yeah, this is looking pretty strong, and it looked pretty dire earlier on.
Yeah.
Wolf Warriors, but it looks like it might just be enough, just because of this Felmore, right? It's so slow.
It's so slow.
And again, I do wonder, like, what do you think about the Felmore play over Bone Chewer Brawler?
I think it's probably right. You just have to pray that they don't have anything big to play, because eking out that 5 damage face, I think, is worth more than the Bone Chewer Brawler, given that you're kind of expecting a clear on it, and even if it's not there, you get 2 damage, whereas optimistically, you get 5 damage at least out of the Felmore. I do think, you know, you have to hope that something goes right, and the Felmore going face, I think, is that thing.
I think if you're ever going to backfire, it's now. When you see your opponents just throwing out all minions, and pretty low value ones at that. One card in hand which you know is a Marcel Cub, there's no burn, right? The only burn could come off the top. Worst case scenario is Quick Shot.
Yeah, you could go Coil Tap, which deals 1 less damage to you, obviously at the expense of a card, which is, you know, 1 more card that could be the second Baron Scavenger. It's kind of tough to figure out exactly.
Yeah,
there we go.
The extra chance at Bristleback is just better than a 6/6 taunt, believe it or not. See Maverick, hands to the head.
That trade,
Derek. I'm choosing to believe that was a trick of the mind.
That was disgusting. That would have gone face every day of the week if it was me. And Baron Kodobane off the top with the high
face.
Yeah, Felmore going face. This is starting to turn around, maybe. There's obviously still Tamsin in hand, but there's no spells to go with it. No Drain Soul found quite yet. It's still not over.
Oh, wait. Raised Dead guarantees Bristleback, right?
What's died so far?
No, it's Torguide, Null, Bristleback? Is it those 3?
Has he played a Torguide this game?
I thought he tapped for 0 at one point. Didn't you do that on the Null?
Oh, yeah, I think you're right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's those 3.
Yeah.
It's adventurous, but I kind of like it.
So what are you expecting? The 1 mana could be Wound Prey. Oh, no, apologies. It's not being played in the list. So it's like Aimed Shot Hero Power is 7 plus a Quick Shot. You can die. You can die on this next turn. And so he's going Raised Dead. If he misses here, this aim shot kills him alone, and he doesn't hit. He has to go tap now. Tap gains him a health, so I do think you have to do it. Or Shadow Blast, okay.
Yeah, this is the quest, right?
Yep. And so he goes up to 9. That's enough to survive aim shot, which is just 7 damage.
And he gets to taunt, and I think he played Cult Neophyte, right? Which is then going to reduce the potential follow-up.
Yeah, if he plays the Neophyte, he's never dead, because it would have to be double aimed shot, I think. And it was close.
This is what Warlock games are like, right? Against aggro. As aggro, sometimes you feel you're almost there, and then they do this, and you're like, oh, they have 1 million damage I can't clear on board. Oops.
This is what I was laying out. This is why I am not opposed to the Altar of Fire tech that Wolf Warriors has, because against aggro, there are two phases of the game. The one where you have more than 10 cards in your deck, and the one where you have less than 10 cards in your deck. Once you hit this point, you win. The vast majority of the time, you just need to hit the Bristleback or the taunts off the Baron Scavengers, and that's just GG then. There's nothing that Maverick can do here.
Yeah, he's doing his best to remove some level of damage. Right now, it's only showing 14. If you assume the Neophyte has to trade, of course.
I mean, logically you can figure out you're dead, because if they didn't play the piggy off the raised dead, it's always going to be.
Yeah, you are right.
The rush, but you pray, you hold out hope that maybe you're mistaken. In the end, though, it is going to be Wolf Warriors 2 taking the win over Maverick, a second place finish, a runner-up for Maverick in history. It's a big win for Wolf Warriors 2, a player that I have not heard of before. But again, another one of these Chinese players representing the new guard that are just dominating these Masters tours.
Yeah, and a really interesting list. We were talking about this before we went on as well, where Wolf Warriors is bringing Shadow Priest, the Quest Shaman with Earth Elemental, the Handlock, and then this Fell Demon Hunter. So again, just a little bit of a mixed bag lineup. It kind of does a bit of everything all right, as opposed to doing one single thing really well. But you can see, just because of how varied everything is, that maybe that's just, you want the Swiss Army knife kind of lineup, as opposed to a sort of narrowly focused lineup instead. I don't know, Derek, there's a lot of questions to be asked during this Masters Tour already, and we're only in round 3.
Yeah, I do hope that Wolf Warriors continues doing well, so that we get to see a full one of his series rather than the second half that we got to see here, as the main match was